In every tribe, there is an alpha male, the top leader, the big kahuna, the big guy. And then there is alpha minus 1, alpha minus 2, alpha minus 13. And to every member of the tribe, it's most important that their rank should be preserved, even if it's alpha minus 14. He's willing to kill alpha minus 15, 16, 17 just to keep his. So those were the benefits we had all inherited. But the problem happens is when you're young and you go into a new family, we all crave the same thing: love, respect, to be part of a family unit where our
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Desi Return. Today, I'm really excited to have Dr. Kalia on our show. This episode is a bit special. Dr. Kalia went to US when he was 19. He has been living in US for more than 40 years, and he is a doctor by profession, and he has expertise in neuroscience, lot of research, and lot of real experience working with people, helping them out for the last 40 years. And in today's topic, we are going to address a little bit different from our regular episodes. We are going to talk about the family dynamics, how people interact, and especially for NRIs who have been living abroad, away from their family, extended family for more than a decade, 2 decades. When they're trying to reconnect back to them, there will be some initial struggles, some of the challenges, and I'm really looking forward to this important topic, which is not something that we usually talk openly. And with an expert that we have on our show, this would shed some light on how we should think about it and help and navigate this important topic. With that, I really want to welcome Dr. Kalia to our show and really looking forward to our discussion today.
Avinashi, it's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the wonderful service that you have been providing NRI community and Indians, and of course everybody else is welcome to watch as well. I'm going to give you a little brief background about myself. I'm from a very small town in Punjab called Hoshiarpur, and I had lived there until about the age of 13, and my dad used to work for Indian CIA called RAW, R&AW, Research and Analysis Wing. So RAW hides its people in various countries in various capacities. So we were working in the counselor's office in Bhutan, in the embassy of India in Bhutan. So I went there in around 1976. So I lived there for 5 years from 1976 to 1980. Then I came back to Hoshiarpur and I did my 11th and 12th grade over there. And I was thinking of going to medical school, and purely coincidentally, my family, part of my family lived in the United States. They said, "Would you like to come visit us?" I said, "Sure." United States in my mind at that time was like a giant Disney World, and everybody's having fun. I said, "Well, why not? Of course, I'd love to visit." And then my family said, "Well, you're going to go to India, go to medical school. Do you want to do that here?" And I was somewhat hesitant because in the United States, you have to get a bachelor's degree, full degree, before you go medical school. Back in those days in 83, in India, you didn't need a bachelor's degree. You could go to medical school right after 12th grade. So anyways, one thing led to the other. I stayed over here. I got a bachelor's in chemistry from Purdue University in the state of Indiana in the United States. And then I went to medical school also in the state of Indiana at Indiana University. And then I did postgraduate training in internal medicine, also from Indiana University. And I have been affiliated with Indiana University and other related hospitals right here in Indiana since 1992 as a doctor. And so that's kind of my background from where my life started out and how I ended up in the United States. But some of the things I'm going to say are not intended to be harsh or critical of either about United States or about India, but they are intended to improve the lives of people. And what I've learned as a doctor and as a professor is that you have to see and evaluate the world as is, not as how you would like it to be. So once you understand the world how it is, then you can slowly and gradually, step by step, build on that reality and try to improve. So before I go into too deep into it, so I want to say a couple of comments. I love India. I love Indian civilization. And the reason I love Indian civilization and India is the soil of India has provided food to my ancestors for at least 5,000 years, but maybe as many as 30,000 years. They have tilled the soil, and my ancestors have probably not actually tilled the soil for the last few thousand years. They've done mostly analytical work, the kind of work I'm doing right now. But nonetheless, they have done that. And the government of India employed my dad, provided us a steady paycheck, and we were always well fed and never hungry. We always had clothes and we always had housing. All that was thanks to government of India. So I love India, even though down the road I might say critical things, but that's intended with love for India, not about. Same way I might say critical things about United States. I love United States also. The reason I love United States is this is a country that has nurtured my mind, given me higher education, given me wonderful employment, and I have been just like the government of India gave us a paycheck, the US government, I'm a federal employee, US government employee. They have given me a steady paycheck, and I have lived a wonderful life in this country. And I've also had the privilege, just like my dad had the privilege with that paycheck raising me and my siblings. I have raised two wonderful daughters. So I love United States for the same reason as well. So all the things I'm going to say, even they might sound harsh or critical, is not intended to be critical, but intended to improve the lives of people all over the world, including in India and United States.
No, yeah. Thanks a lot for such a detailed, a beautiful overview. I mean, I couldn't do justice to talk about those details. As you said, I think the goal here is to share the insights from the experience and the knowledge that you have, and it's your thoughts. I mean, there is no with any wrong intention about life in India or life in US. This is to help, as you rightly said, to improve our own humans around the world. I think that's the goal.
Sure.
Yeah. So if we can start, maybe if you can share a little bit about, some of the research that you have done, especially from a neuroscience perspective in the family dynamics, from your own journey, I think that would be helpful. And then we can start from there.
Sounds excellent. So like I mentioned before, neuroscience was not my main topic of interest. Just I grew up in a middle class Indian family, and just like everybody else's parents, they tell their kids study hard and get a good job. That was the idea in our household as well. And in that idea, I don't know how exactly, for small multitude of reasons, we narrowed down to become a doctor for me in our household. And I had very little real practical idea of what is it involved in becoming a doctor, what do you do as a doctor, and what kind of things do you see. So that was a journey in itself, and that journey is what led me towards neuroscience, and then I'll slowly and gradually wind down that neuroscience into a present discussion of family dynamics. But I want to take about 30 or 60 seconds to also explain my interest in neuroscience and the opportunities for India. As I mentioned to you, I'm extremely proud of India, especially the growth, economic growth it has done. since I have the pleasure and the benefit of seeing India from far away in terms of distance and time, so I see the beauty of India, but I also see the shortcomings of India, not through India's fault, through the fault of other people. We unfortunately still have about 600 million people in India who live close to the poverty line, earning less than $1,000, $1,500 a year. So I just kind of feel like I have a moral obligation to do something, if I can do something for them as well as for me. And one of the things is, when you live so far away from India, you see huge amount of opportunities being exploited by people all over the world. And then you see how those opportunities are being exploited. And some of those opportunities, there are this multi-trillion-dollar opportunities, but nobody in India knows about because you haven't, left India. And I've had the benefit of being away from India. And I'm in a position in life, I have plenty of money. I don't need to earn any money, so I can dedicate my time to that. And we might come back to the nursing homes and elder care, etc., in this country. And that's a huge opportunity for India. I know Modi government is more into manufacturing in India. Those are important things. But I want to bring to the Indian society and the Modi Department of Commerce that there are multiple other opportunities also we should look. And these are not small opportunities. These are opportunities worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and many of them probably go into trillions of dollars. So we'll come back to that in a minute. But let me kind of bring myself back to the neuroscience and the family dynamics. So my journey in neuroscience was, like I mentioned to you earlier, not because I decided I'm going to be a neuroscientist and do that. Mine was a little circuitous journey. So when you are in medical school, you do different rotations. You are an IT engineer. You spend a little bit learning about chip design, hardware, software, and so on and so forth. In medical science, you spend a month with the heart doctors, you learn about cardiology, a month about stomach doctors, you learn about GI, and so on and so forth. And one of the rotations that you do is something called forensic pathology. Forensic pathology is essentially the place where you try and figure out, why did somebody pass away? And did they pass away from natural causes? If it's a natural cause, nobody is fault. You just go about with the normal of life, and you give the body of the person who's passed away to the family to do the normal funeral rites. But you also want to find out, did somebody die from homicide? Did somebody killed and somebody has to be prosecuted? Or did somebody commit suicide? Obviously, most societies don't want their citizens committing suicide. So you want to find out how many people commit suicide, why did they do, and what can be done to improve that situation. So those are the normal three things. But there was a fourth thing which I did not anticipate. And the fourth thing was, this was late 1980s and early 90s. And one of the things was there was a peak of a drug epidemic in this country. The drug was cocaine, but there's another version of drug cocaine called crack. And with the crack epidemic, there was a huge amount of violence in young people, killing each other, shooting each other, especially among African Americans, but in general among the whole population. And that I found was extremely sad and strange among the human devastation that drug epidemic was doing. And I know that drugs are becoming a more problem in India also now. So that's part of my interest, to see if I can use some of my neuroscience to help people there as well as here. And the other category of people that I did not fully anticipate to see was it actually, in reality, now have done research that phenomena happens all over the world, but happens more so in Western countries, developed countries. So when people are elderly or disabled or chronically sick, quite often they have nobody who would look after them. and nobody's checking up on them on a daily basis to know, are they well fed? Are they healthy? Are they taking their medication? Are they living, or have they passed away? So unfortunately, in this country, lots of people pass away. Nobody knows they have passed away, and their bodies essentially lay in their own either houses or apartments or condominiums or wherever they are. And then, of course, when they pass away, their bodies begin to decompose. And a phenomenon that I was not familiar with, when white Caucasian people pass away, and depending on the humidity and the temperature and other environmental conditions, their bodies turn pitch black, just like the hair on your black hair on your head, or a black thing, the device you have on your file cabinet. And then on that black body, if somebody took a handful of rice and threw, and you open the body bag, in this country, in the United States, we bring bodies in plastic bag. You open that, and there's this white rice all over. Well, within a second, you realize this is not white rice; these are maggots.
Wow.
And these are people who passed away through no crime of their own, and nobody did any harm to them, and they didn't cause any harm, but they passed away, and they just passed away, and nobody knows about them, that they're living or dead. And I just found that scene so disturbing. And then, like I mentioned, my background was from a small town in India, relatively protected background. My mind just could not fathom. And when you open those bodies in the belly and the chest, and the stench is just something beyond imagination. And then these insects from there, maggots and insects are kind of buzzing around, even though you have a mask on your face. They get in your mask and get in your nose or in your ear, and it's just an absolutely disgusting feeling. And what I learned is that that particular scene gave me a moral authority to go discuss this underbelly of Western society anywhere with anybody, because if I'm going to be asked as a doctor in training to have to see this scene, people have to know about it and have to be willing to do something about it. This cannot go in silence. So that's how I started. And then, of course, as a pathologist, you open the skull and look at the brain, make sure there's no gunshot wound or there's no stroke or some other injury. So when I opened this person's skull, this brain fell into my hand, not like the normal pictures of brain we are all used to, but a gray jello. And I still vividly remember this was in 88, 88, 89, 90 time frame. And I was thinking, I'm working so hard to become a doctor, getting education, paying student loans, borrowing money. But is this life all about, in the end, your gray jello kind of, oozes out and then falls into somebody's hand? And I just found that scene extremely disturbing. So that's how I got interested in neuroscience. And then from there, I have found multiple facets of human behavior and how this happens. Now I have multiple, things on how that happens and how the crime happens and those kind of things. And what I found out was that this phenomena, so since now I'm 60 years old and I have had time to look back, this phenomena actually happens in big cities in India also. So this is not, and happens in Japan, happens in Korea, in Europe, all over the world, but tends to happen more so in urbanized societies, and Western societies are all, as we know, about 100 or to 200 years ahead of India in this kind of a phenomenon. So that was kind of my interest into neuroscience, and now I'm going to bring it to family and family dynamics. So as I became a doctor, navigating through a Western society when you land from far away is not at all easy. And Western medical systems are very complex and very difficult to understand. So if you land fresh from India and you're not comfortable with the language, the culture, it's very complicated. So people would call me, some of the people who would call me would be friends, and then friends' family, and then second, their friends and friends. So pretty soon, at one point, about once I went to exchange my iPhone and it told me how many contacts I have, I realized there were 4,000 Indian families in central Indiana calling me for medical help. Some of the medical help is very simple. I ran out of my blood pressure medication. Can you write me a prescription so I don't have to go to a regular doctor because I don't have money, I don't have insurance, so things like that. But one of the phenomena would be sometimes the whole family would come and they say, well, and the way I used to do was I had a huge room where families would sit, and then I'll have one person, because of privacy, etc., come in and talk to me. So mother-in-law would come and say, I'm depressed. So I said, well, why are you depressed? And their idea was that whatever is ailing me, including sad feeling and depression, the doctor would have a pill and it would go away. But one of the things I've learned is we in the Western medical science have not discovered any such pill yet, and nor are we likely to discover it anytime in the next 50 to 100 years. So I'd ask them, and what I found out was that they were kind of living, it's like fish living out of water. They're living in a very, very difficult, hostile environment. And then they'll say, okay, the next family member, and then the daughter-in-law would come. Well, the daughter-in-law is also depressed. Well, why are you depressed? Well, in reality, they basically both hate each other's guts, and that's the reason they are. And I found this phenomena rather common. And like I mentioned, I had left India at the age of 19, so I didn't understand fully the family dynamics. And I didn't quite understand on why this happens. So I'm going to digress for about 1 minute and explain to you the underlying phenomena that happens in the brain. And then from that phenomena, I'm going to explain to you on how that ties into. So there is a very nice, famous Stanford neuroscientist who's also a primatologist. And for those people who don't have medical background, primatologists are people who study primates. And primates are things like chimpanzees, monkeys, gorillas. They all fall in one large family. So his idea was to see how these primates behave in their natural environment, not in the zoos, because when you put animals in the zoos, their behavior gets modified. Mm-hmm. So what he found out in Kenya, in a national reserve, was that baboons are most representative of us. And the term for us humans in medical science is called Homo sapiens. So he said baboons are, so he started studying baboons. And then he found thousands and thousands of very interesting observations, and he's written many books, but I'm going to condense his primatology to a few seconds. What he found out was in every tribe, there is an alpha male, the top leader, the big kahuna, the big guy. And then there is alpha -1, alpha -2, alpha -13. And to every member of the tribe, it's most important that their rank should be preserved, even if it's alpha -14. He's willing to kill alpha -15, 16, 17, just to keep his -14 rank. And what he and I found out is that when we humans, Homo sapiens, are in our natural environment, we also have hierarchical ranks. The whole society is structured with those ranks, and we do not want to lose our rank. So that brings us down to the family. In the family, quite often the ranks are based on how the family has been running. The dad has a rank of his responsibility in the family. Mom has his rank, and then daughters and sons come along, so they have obviously their ranks. The problem happens is that ranked phenomena, if it's a fully functional, nice, loving family, continues for decades. And then something strange happens. A stranger comes into your family, either in the form of a son-in-law or a daughter-in-law, but we are going to focus more on the daughter-in-law for this discussion. Now, this person has to navigate their place in the family on where do they fit in this hierarchy. And nobody wants to be lowest on the rung in the family. So they have some internal aspirations that, can I improve my rank just a little bit? Yeah. So they are coming with that aspiration. Now, the problem happens is the mother-in-law is the one who has the highest amount of conflict in this situation, and there is huge amount of Indian literature, music, movies on this topic, so I don't need to go into that. My interest is neuroscience. Everybody's familiar with this phenomenon. So what happens is mother-in-law is usually in Indian households in charge of the kitchen, and that's where the daughter-in-law has to interact. The mother-in-law has their idea of, when I'm in the kitchen, the chakla and belna have to be on the right side of the cooking range. And the daughter-in-law might say, well, I accidentally put it on the left side. So either accidentally or she's used to somebody always putting on the left side. So these small little things happen. And this, in reality, in terms of neuroscience, is a phenomenon called our private space. Private space is if you go to a large beach that's empty, you go sit down, put your towel, lay on the beach. You don't want the whole beach is empty and the beach is 50 square, 50 acres. You don't want some other guy who comes sit right next to you within 3 feet of you. You want him to sit far away. As the beach gets crowded, you're willing to tolerate people near you, and animals do the same thing in the wild. They don't want, animals don't want crowding. But now you are in this situation of crowding, where people are crowding each other's space. And then in that crowding, what happens is animals want to establish dominance. This is my space and this is how it's going to be run. And the other person thinking, well, for 2 years I've run it according to me, at least let me put my chakla on this side. So these small things create lots of friction. And then the other thing we have unfortunately inherited for centuries and in our culture is the dowry phenomenon. And that kind of is well known to the Indians in India and around the world. It creates lots of ill will and so on and so forth also. But in the end, what I found is this dowry phenomena is partly getting economic resources, but partly it's about dominance. That you should have given us this much and you didn't give us this much, and let's quantify this, and if you didn't give us, let's kind of make you feel bad about yourself. So those dynamics of closed space and all these other dominance phenomena are already in play in the Indian families. And then what happens is, then some of these families end up in a totally different culture, as, for example, the culture I'm most familiar with is United States. Now you have brought this kind of dowry, dominance, conflict from India as a whole large extended family unit over here. And when you come to United States, there is totally different dynamics at work. And some of those dynamics are well experienced by working couples in India living in urban settings. There's the pressure of childcare, who's going to take care of children, house chores, who's going to take care of those chores, who's going to do shopping, cooking, cleaning. So all those things pose a huge amount of challenge to families in India and around the world. And those challenges are very profound. They are not small challenges. In the United States, 53% of the marriages end up in divorce. And some of the reason, since I'm a doctor and I see lots of families, etc., and I'm not going to mention the hospital I work for because hospitals don't like my affiliation, but over there I've seen thousands and thousands of dysfunctional families and the reasons for that. And what I've found out is that when people jump into this marriage situation, they have no idea or understanding what they are jumping into. And I found out the same phenomena is true in Indian culture. A nuclear family who's got 2 sons or 2 daughters, when they're jumping into getting their kids married, they have no idea on what they're jumping into and how they should behave in that particular thing, and how they have to kind of lower their expectations of dominance and how to make the new person function. And the new person also has to come into that family with some kind of understanding on how they're going to go with the flow and so on and so forth. So those kind of create huge amount of problems of dynamics, and the Indian newspapers are filled with all the devastation that happens from there on. And a small digression I'm going to take. In 2016, I went to India to my hometown, Hoshiarpur. And I have some connections with the judicial system, the legal system. And there were elderly grandmas in their 60s, 70s in jail because their granddaughter committed suicide.
Hmm.
And the way the Indian laws had evolved, that if your if you're not granddaughter, if your daughter-in-law commits suicide, you must have done something, so by default you are guilty. Now, I don't think any lady in their 60s or 70s envisioned spending their old age in a jail. So this is a fairly destructive phenomena, and that's the reason I decided to, bring primatology and neuroscience into it. And what I've learned is our civilization really does nothing to prepare us as families on how to manage this potential conflict situation. And our educational system was really reestablished in late 1700s, early 1800s, based on the needs of the Britishers. The Britishers had to set up a kind of a assembly line education with the 3 R's in mind: reading, writing, arithmetic. For example, if they are going to have enslaved Indian laborers cut down the trees from our forest and take lumber back to England to make ships, what they want you to know is, do you know how to cut down the trees, measure the size, and make sure all the pieces of lumber are the same size? And can somebody count how many lumber are shipped into the Indian trains, railway system, and how much money is made? So that was their main interest. And that system is essentially what we have inherited and expounded on. Now, that system is good. It was good enough to prepare me for medical school. It was good enough to prepare you for IT and chip design education, but it really does nothing to help us with these kind of family dynamic situations. So the reason I got interested in you and you got interested in me is now some of these NRI families are thinking of going back to India. Some of them, for a small, short time, had a conflict of the kind we described in India, but then the nuclear family, husband, wife, and couple of kids picked up their stuff, moved to United States, England, Europe, Singapore. And the problem happens is when they go back, whenever there is a wildfire in the forest, you might think the fire is dead, but unless all coals have been extinguished with water, those embers are still there. The wildfire could come back. So one of the things, and in our short time, there was a young lady who had mentioned that she had gone back to those embers and then ended up, their nuclear family got destroyed. They ended up getting divorced. So for every one person who tells us that, there are probably another 100 who are kind of struggling, and probably 10, 20 who are going to get divorced. So this is not a small phenomenon. So the reason I wanted to bring all this neuroscience, primatology, etc., into this thing is that people have to really understand going forward who are thinking of forming new family units in India. So they think about that, how are we going to do this better than all the destructive forces that are already in our brain? And secondly, for people who already have formed family units and have left their extended families and moved away from them, now they're going to go back. The part of the reason those NRIs like you and me are thinking of coming back to India is, number one, for the love of India, love of Indian culture, Indian food, but also some attraction for our families. So those families can play a hugely positive role, but also can be very destructive. So I'm going to give a practical example of the positive role. The reason American economy, United States economy is so vibrant, and the reason you and I got attracted to come here was because of capitalism. Capitalism has this wonderful, vibrant economy, but there's no guarantee in life for anything. One day you have a job, next day you don't have a job. One day you have an income to pay the mortgage, pay the rent, and have a home and family. Next day you don't have it, you're homeless. The Indian extended family that our ancestors had conceived of provides built-in benefit for those kind of things. The built-in benefit is, if two brothers and dad are living together, one of them loses income, they're not going to throw the third person out on the street. But those benefits may not be visible to a young person's mind when they are young, and they may not be needed for 5, 10, 15 years. The other benefit of extended families was, and extended families were partly designed by civilization, but partly by necessity. 2, 3, 400 years back, around the world, everywhere, most people died within 7-mile radius of where they were born. There were no airplanes, there were no trains, no automobiles, no cars, no buses. So essentially, if your dad had a small plot of land in Madhya Pradesh, in Bhopal, that plot of land was going to be divided between two brothers, and they all lived nearby. And now, as a grown-up adult, I know not every extended family in that setting was good, but there was a spectrum. There were lots of families very loving. So if you are in a loving family with all the family members living nearby, certainly nobody would let their family member die and never be looked at, and then let them die and let their dead body, I hate to use the word dead body, but that's the real word, decompose for weeks or months on end. So those were the benefits we had all inherited. But the problem happens is when you're young and you go into a new family, those benefits is not what you're thinking about. What you're thinking about is the conflict in the kitchen and the conflict in the family room and all those kind of things. So those benefits come farther down the road, but our brain cannot focus on multiple problems at the same time, especially which are not in our immediate focus. The day-to-day conflict might be in our immediate focus. So that was my reasoning for bringing this phenomena to the attention. That those people who are thinking of and those people in our audience who are going to watch this YouTube video, they may not know that we have a WhatsApp group, and in the WhatsApp group there is like 500, 600, 700 people, and there are men and women, and everybody's giving their own thing, and lots of the ladies have a lot of hesitations about going back to India. My husband may not support me, and I might get blamed for everything and have no support. So those kind of things, when they end up in India for NRIs to come back, are going to be hugely challenging. And it's better to think about those things up front, rather than, it's better to learn how to swim before you jump with all four into the water and then find out, oh, I don't know how to swim. How am I going to get out of here? So that was the phenomena I wanted to bring to your attention. And again, these are all things which are manageable. When I was 19 years old in a small town in Hoshiarpur, I didn't know how I'm going to become a doctor in the United States. When you were 15 years old in India, you didn't know how you're going to become a chip designer, but you slowly and gradually learn these things and manage these things. So same way, the things that I mentioned to you, they are manageable. But they are not something that we cannot overcome at all. But first of all, people have to recognize that these potential problems are built into our culture and our civilization. And some people experience them to mild degree, and then they are all grown up adults about it and manage it and kind of smooth it out. But there are certainly a significant percentage where that's not the case. And then it can lead to all kinds of destructions and so on and so forth. So that was my main focus. And I think I have kind of very nicely tied down my knowledge of neuroscience and family dynamics and primatology and so on and so forth. So I don't really have anything specific more to add to the story I gave you, but I'd be happy to answer any questions you have based on your time constraint.
First of all, yeah, thank you very much for giving such a nice overview, bringing wealth of knowledge of so much of books into concise information, and trying to present this information from a scientific perspective, right? Especially with the neuroscience, primatology, and from a scientific background. So maybe a few questions from my side,
Sure.
based on the
Please.
discussion so far. I think you kind of mentioned about some of these family dynamics in terms of the hierarchy and so on. As we have evolved, with different information, do you see things have changed, like what it was in 1980s or 1990s to 2020, in terms of these hierarchy or the power, or do you think it's still the same? Just curious on that one part from us.
What I found out was it has certainly changed, but it has not necessarily changed for the better. So let me explain to you. When you are living in a hostile environment in a household, you are really living like a hostage over there. When you're living like a hostage, and not to go too much into the weeds of neuroscience, there is a part of our brain called the sympathetic nervous system, which is like the accelerator. So then continuously your blood pressure is high, and under stress you eat more, your cholesterol goes high, and as you eat more and gain weight, you become more prone to diabetes that leads to heart disease, strokes, and all kinds of health issues and health challenges. So living in an unpleasant, hostile environment is not good for anybody at all.
Yeah.
So what I found out in that same small town in India was there were lots of mother-in-laws who had learned that whatever we say, it can be held against us in a court of law. So we are going to say nothing. We're going to keep our feelings in there, and in their own household behave like basically captive audiences and just do the mechanical work of running the household, running the kitchen. And that also is not good for mental health. And so if you are living in your own house and you can't express your thoughts, I mean, you and I are just expressing our thoughts, and you can see on what different parts of the world and what different disciplines I bring my thoughts. But if in the beginning of this video you had told me, Dr. Kalia, you can talk about everything, but you can't talk about topic A, I just feel constrained all during this, or vice versa. So what I found out was that we as Indians and Indian civilization need to have an open discussion. So when we are living in a household, we are living a life of joy rather than a life of, something has to be done and the mouth has to be kept shut. Now, for certain things, it's important to keep your mouth shut, but at the same time, it's nice to be able to come out and say, okay, person X in the house, this bothers you. Person Y in the house, this bothers you. How can we come to a happy thing? Just like I gave you the example of the beach. If there is a 100-acre beach, nobody's expecting that the whole beach is empty. You'll come sit right next to me, 3 feet away, sit far away from me. So that's our personal space being invaded. So same way, whenever there's going to be two people living together, there's always going to be some level of conflict. And the conflict happens because you're invading each other's space. I like my pen to be held parallel to the ground. You like to be held, in a perpendicular to the ground in a pen holder. So that conflict is going to be there. But as long as you and I both understand each other, that, if we keep it like this or like, it really doesn't change life that much. Sometimes if I make the mistake of keeping it like this, you learn to forgive me. Or sometimes if you like it this way, I accidentally bump it off. So the idea has to be so people can talk about these things. So that's what our civilization has to do. And if I was the king of the world and I had unlimited resources tomorrow, what I would do is design a 3 to 6 month course in Indian civilization. The reason I use 3 to 6 months is in the United States, we're used to a semester system rather than the whole year of premarital counseling, where the young people who are going to get married, they should understand what kind of challenges come across, but also the whole family get involved, and not only the boys' family, but the girls' family, and all of us learn about these things. So that leads to a happier, harmonious life. And what I've learned is I've told this story to at least 100,000 patients. My goal for every human being is to be happy, healthy, and productive. And that's every human being's goal for themselves. So everybody in India has the same goal. It's no different anywhere else. Everybody wants to have a happy, healthy, and productive family. However, what I've learned is this kind of thing doesn't accidentally happen. Like the rain accidentally falls on you when you're walking in the rain, and you get wet. You have to have an umbrella to stop the rain. So same way, these conflicts are going to fall on you, whether you learn how to manage them or let them accidentally fall on you. And when they accidentally fall on you, they are very, very destructive and very, very disruptive. And that takes away a lot of people's creative energies. People who are going to go out to work, they can't focus on their work. People who are at home, their blood pressure is high, they are tense, they're ready to basically kill each other. And yesterday, and I'm not going to mention the name, yesterday I talked to a gentleman from Singapore, and we again came to connect with each other through the WhatsApp group that you or the people in the background have started. And he was very nice and honest, and he was explaining that it's a good thing we don't have guns in India and like United States. He said, otherwise there could have been mass shooting in our family. There was so much tension. And these are like 6 people, living in a small confined space. What happened is he went from Singapore to India. And because of COVID, he got stuck in that family dynamic structure. And there was so much hostility. And he said he just felt horrible at the end of it. And you don't want to take your little kids to India and your spouse to India and then have this kind of a negative feeling.
Yeah.
So I think that's where education and learning about these dynamics ahead of time can mitigate 99% of the problem.
Got it, definitely. So I think I have a couple of questions that I want to ask, if that's okay
Please,
from a time.
please do.
The first question is maybe related to NRIs, right? I know we kind of touched about some of these family dynamics, the civilization in India. And I know it's kind of evolved, like, from a big joint families to like nuclear families, and still like, it still happens. But someone who moved from India to abroad, where they experience different culture. I think you kind of slightly
Sure.
touched on the topic.
Sure.
And somebody who has been living in abroad, let's take US, for example, who has been living there for more than a decade, 2 decades, there is definitely an influence of the US culture and kind of changes,
Definitely.
with the kids, with the spouses, with the family. So maybe my question there was the external factors, like especially where you live in terms of like the dynamics that we talked about. How does that influence and how does that adapt us, based on the environment, and how our thought process could change? That's one question. And then I will ask the second question after that. I think, when they're trying to move back, what are some of the practical tips that they have to go through?
So I'm gonna use example in recently from, and I'm gonna give my thanks to you. There was a video that I saw you and the gentleman from Bangalore, but in that algorithm, I don't know whether I searched for it or your algorithm or somebody sent me a video of a young lady who is in United States, lives in San Francisco area. And I think she either left a job and went to India and started some company called Fire Freedom Early Retirement or something, or it was somebody else. So I don't remember all the details, but I remember the gist of the story. The gist of the story was in San Francisco, she could get up in the middle of the night, hire an Uber, go anywhere, or get in the bus, go anywhere. Nobody's stopping her.
Yeah.
She could take a beach towel, go lay in the beach, do anything they wanted. Nobody's stopping her. Lay in a park, do anything, shop anywhere, go anywhere, do anything. So there's full freedom. But along with freedom comes the responsibilities, like you mentioned. There is no help to do anything, and if one family member gets sick, and we already talked about elderly being neglected in this country, and the economic opportunity that I would hope Indian society can exploit from that. But essentially, there is no help. So when you end up in India, an extended family, like I mentioned to you, there's the economic benefit of insulation. If there's, one person doesn't have a job or income, there's the benefit of help. Somebody gets sick, childcare, this, that, and the other. So the problem happens is when people come from so much freedom, and none of this freedom is, anything bad about it. I mean, you're just free to do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
But now you're suddenly in a structure where, if I don't know whether what percentage of your audience are familiar with the word or a piece of clothing called bikinis. Bikinis is this tiny little clothing on the top and the bottom, and ladies, well, there are lots of people in the Western culture wear that, and I'm sure there are lots of Indian young ladies wear that. Now, can you imagine if you go in a traditional family on a family vacation and you get your bikini out and jump in the pool? Well, that's going to create a scene. So those kind of things, or lots of ladies in the Western world drink alcohol. And I'm not saying I like alcohol. I personally would prefer that nobody in the world drank alcohol. But clearly, in the Indian culture where we are, alcohol consumption is not a problem. And I just purely coincidentally had been made aware of a Facebook group called NRI Moms. And it was just amazing on how much, ladies drinking alcohol or not drinking, how much conflict was already present in the United States in the families. Now you take all that conflict into a Indian household, you're just, looking for a recipe of those old embers to kind of explode. And those are the things people have to know, that when you are living in an extended family, and your extended family has never left a small town in UP. They have no idea that halfway around the world, ladies are drinking alcohol and running around in bikinis. Just think, when you see something like this, there's going to be problems. So the idea is for people to become aware. So I think those are the kind of things that I would say. Did I answer your question specifically?
Yeah, I
What you
think it
had?
kind of touches a little bit. I think it just depending on where you are, it has the different pros
Sure.
and cons and responsibility, the freedom and aspects.
Sure.
So one thing that I wanted to check with you was, do you have any practical tips, for someone who has been in a nuclear family, right? I mean, when I say nuclear, it's like, you spouse, with a couple of kids or
And children, yes.
yeah, and who has been living in this Western world with a lot more flexibility and so on. And if they're considering about moving back to India, what are some of the practical things that they have to talk through, openly discuss
Sure.
and
Sure.
think through,
Sure.
like the point that you mentioned, learn the swimming before you deep dive, right? Some of the things that they
Deep
have
dive.
to consider before they
Yes.
return back
Yeah.
to India. Any practical
Sure.
input there? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm again bring my experience of neuroscience and being a doctor into this. In that medical setting where I saw lots of conflict among the couples. What I found out was none of the couples whose conflict continued and did not improve were willing to lay their cards out honestly, openly on the floor. They all would have some secret agenda, and they would want the doctor to tell the other person to change, but they won't tell you what their thinking is. So for the families to function properly, everybody has to be honest. So I'm going to pretend like that I am a female. I'm Mrs. Smith. I'm 35 years old. And I like having my alcohol drink when the men are drinking in the family. And I know fully well that I'm Mrs. Smith, and that's going to cause conflict in my family. So the thing to tell is, if that alcohol drink is that important to you, tell your husband, hey, I'm not going to stop drinking just because we are in Bareilly, in UP, or in Calcutta, in or Mumbai or wherever. I'm going to continue doing this. Is that going to be acceptable? Ask your in-laws, or don't go live in the same household, maybe live nearby each other. So there are multiple ways of mitigating this kind of a problem, but people have to be honest. If a alcohol drink or whatever,
Yeah.
behavior is that important to you and you're not going to change, let somebody know about it. Don't kind of, surprise people that, if you are in a joint extended family, and suddenly somebody, men are drinking and they offer you a drink. So, okay, I'll have a drink too. And somebody, your mother-in-law is ready to have a heart attack while you're having a party. So those are I think, is the important point is put your cards honestly. And there's a very good possibility a small group of people might decide, this is just never going to work for us in India, even though it works for us in the United States or Europe. So maybe we should just go back to visit India and not go there to live, or live in a modified kind of environment. So I think the key, or whatever bothers you,
Sure.
And the whole reason this destruction happens is when people are dishonest, when they're not honestly willing to open their brain and their mind and put their cards. If everybody, like when we are playing that poker, if everybody's cards were visible to each other, there would be no need to be guessing, what is he carrying in his hand. So I think honesty is the only way for this thing to make work. And that premarital, 6-month course I was saying, again, that also has to be honest. People have to learn honesty, that if you are going to make, remember, this honesty is going to mean when you are elderly and not able to take care of yourself, do you want somebody to come and take care of you, give you food, your medical help with love and respect and a smile, or somebody neglect you or abuse you? So that neglect and abuse that I mentioned is a huge economic opportunity, and maybe we'll talk down the road for Indian civilization to capitalize on Western civilization. But that's essentially what ends up happening. And in this country, in the United States, you can hire people who would give you the food and also give you the medicine, but they may or may not give you with the smile. They may not give you with the love. But if you want that down the road, then you have to keep the family dynamic respectful, where everybody is mutually loved and respected. And that, in my mind, is the most important thing for human beings, because we all crave the same thing: love, respect, to be part of a family unit where our feelings are kept in mind. So
thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts and some insights and how to think about, right? I think the key thing is, don't hide any of your thoughts. Put everything out that's more important to you, so that you discuss it beforehand and make sure that you are aligned, if that makes sense to move or not move, or whatever practical way to handle that. So thank you very much, Dr. Kalia, for your time, and really appreciate you providing a lot of insights and from a scientific perspective, how the family dynamics works, and how to think about it, and some of the things that you mentioned, especially the pre-counseling, talk through all the details beforehand and so on, which are very important, especially for someone making this big decision, whether it's living or moving to another country and so on. So that would be very, very valuable to all our audience. So thanks a lot for sharing your thoughts on that.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope that some of the insights I bring would play a constructive and a useful role in our civilization, and especially for NRIs thinking of moving to India.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks. Bye-bye.